Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Dementia Matters, the first of our subject matter series of Furncare webinars for 2024. I'm Mike Goldwater, and I'll be your host. I've been part of the Furncare team for over a year now, and I'm joined by a quite exceptional panel of experts this morning. We'll be discussing ways to help you develop an outstanding care framework and ideal environments for your dementia residents and indeed their carers too. Before I introduce our panel though, it may be useful to give you some background for context. For 20 years now, Furncare have been creating interiors and providing furniture for care communities. About 3 years ago, we launched a product development program in partnership with the Dementia Services Development Centre at the University of Stirling. The result of that program was a range of furniture called Admonere, which features in Remini, the Furncare Dementia Collection, which we unveiled just a few weeks ago and is now available from stock within just 5 days of ordering. So, talking of the University of Stirling, I'd like to introduce today's panel. We are joined by Lindsay Hutchison and Dave Wilson-Wynn from the University of Stirling Dementia Services Development Centre, which from this point onwards I will refer to as DSDC. David, maybe you could just explain to us what the DSDC does.
Yeah, hi there. Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here and nice to see everyone. The Dementia Services Development Centre is a globally renowned centre for knowledge exchange in terms of dementia care and dementia design. We were one of the first universities to commit to specific research into how important the physical environment is for people that are living with dementia. The centre itself was formed in 1989, funnily enough the year that I was born, so which is obviously quite a nice year. So but yeah, there's a number of strings to our bow. The Dementia Services Development Centre works on an ecosystem of the transferring of research into practice and practice into research. So our job, myself and my colleague Lindsay here, is to look at what research is telling us and implement tangible resources to practice. So that's our role.
Yeah, that's great, and certainly we've experienced that firsthand, as I say, in developing our Remini collection. So, Lindsay, we first met when you visited Furncare, the showroom, a few months ago. You're Associate Interior Designer at DSDC. I was going to ask you about your role at the uni, but within the last 24 hours, you've made a rather exciting announcement. I think you know what I'm referring to. So you share the news with everyone.
Yes, so yesterday we sent 2 very large reports to Furncare, something we've been working on for a couple of months since we visited. So I can announce that you have received a gold award, which is the gold standard, the highest standard for the Remini environment, which is the bedroom design schemes, and that includes the Admonere bedroom furniture as well, and they received a 1A standard, which is for our product inclusive design for dementia for products. So it's been a long journey. We've worked with you for a good few years now, and it's been great to develop the designs with you, and I think it shows that it was worthwhile going through that process, that journey, because you've received the highest possible standard for both product and environment. So congratulations, well done.
Thank you very much. I can assure you there was lots of whooping in the office when the news broke yesterday. We're delighted and very, very proud of that. So that's fantastic. Thank you for that vote of confidence.
Yeah, well done.
We're also joined, I'm sure we'll come back to that at some stage during the rest of the webinar, but we're also joined by Ruth French, Operations Director at Stowe Healthcare and a Director of the Outstanding Society. Great to hear you speak at the Care Show last week, Ruth, Unlocking Excellence, or Gold Standard as we now like to call it. You have dedicated memory centres for dementia residents. So caring for them clearly requires special skills and dedicated environments. Is that right?
Yeah, I think in terms of our experience, and we have 8 nursing and residential homes across East Anglia, and I guess to give a little bit of context, the homes that we acquire are generally homes that have been rated requires improvement or inadequate. And as a company, we take them on a journey of improvement, and 4 of our 8 homes are now rated outstanding. So I think, you know, what it shows is there are lots of things that are key components of supporting people to have to really be able to live a great life every day. And I think environment is a key part of that. We have 2 specialist memory centres, and hopefully through this presentation, I'll be able to share some of the things that we've done working with Furncare, which has really made those environments which give people a reason to get out of bed each day. And that is a big focus for us. Give people a reason to get out of bed, allow them to take risks. And I think actually in social care, we've traditionally been very poor at giving people that reason to get out of bed. We bring them in, we take everything away from them, we make their beds, we make their tea, we give them a bit of toast, we're even buttering it for them. So there's lots of things environmentally that we can do to really support an improved environment for people living in social care.
That's great. Thank you for that, Ruth. Wonderful. Paul. Paul Gaskell is with us too. Hi, Paul. Paul is Director of Dementia Care at Rumwood Homes. Paul, you've developed space for dementia care, but that doesn't allude to physical space, does it?
No, space starts with actually listening to people who live in our homes. We have 64 homes in England. I was invited to the company to develop a dementia program to support people with dementia, and we believe that people can live well with dementia with the right support. So listen to people with dementia. I had 20 different meetings with 20 different groups of residents, and we asked them the same question: what do you need from us in life to live well with dementia? And the essence of it was boiled down to 5 different things. Number 1 is stars, which is the people who work in the home. Second thing is person. I need to be seen as me. I need to be able to be me and known as me. 3 is people being active. Like Ruth was saying, you have to have a purpose. I want a reason to get up. I want to do things that mean something to me. 4 is connections. I still need to build new relationships, have friends around me, have people that know me. I have to have, links with my community. And the 5th one is environment. And residents said, in a nutshell, the place we live has a major impact on us living well. Our care home should be vibrant and comfortable, structured yet homely. And activity is integrated into the living space in my day. And one team member said, people don't live in our workplace, we work in their home. So that's what we believe. It's a home that belongs to people who live in that home, and we are part of that connection and the community with them.
Well, that's great. So space really works. And Lindsay, I saw you nodding in agreement there, and that also ties in very nicely with how Ruth described the operation. So far, we're a united team. Okay, Jade, your next special projects coordinator at Furncare. Jade, you have a degree in interior design and you design care home interiors at Furncare now. Was that an area of specialisation in your university course or something you discovered later?
University, gosh, that was a long time ago. Yes, so I did cover it in my university course, but it wasn't something that was pushed in terms of sort of the actual course credentials itself. I did choose to focus in on sort of care home design as a area of my own interest, really. I sort of did my market research at the time, visited local care homes, spoke with managers, residents. I wanted to greater understand, their needs, how we can design and have an impact on the lives of those living within care environments. So yes, in essence, I did sort of focus in on care design whilst I was doing my degree. That was many years ago now. And my dissertation title was actually how can we design or how can design improve the lives of the ageing population? So yeah, absolutely.
It's a shame you didn't know Lindsay back in those days, or indeed David, but that's That's good. So we've all met each other now. We all know each other. We're all friends. Let's move on. As the late Professor Tom Kitwood so succinctly put it, when you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. I think that's a fantastic quote. It actually means it doesn't fit all. And I think what you've already told us this morning absolutely confirms that. So, so there are nevertheless conflicting theories, and we have to acknowledge that. And there are different schools of thought. But what can we all agree on? Let's start with you, David. How would the University of Stirling define dementia from a kind of a clinical perspective?
Yeah, so dementia is a condition which affects just shy of 1 million people within the UK and over 55 million people globally. And what research is telling us, and the projections are telling us, is that within the next 15 to 20 years, diagnosis rates will more than double globally. Dementia is a condition which will affect 1 in 2 of us in our lifetime, whether that's we ourselves living with the diagnosis or supporting someone who's living with the diagnosis, or indeed both. It's a condition, a progressive condition, which affects each person completely differently, and exactly like the quote that you've just mentioned, it is unique to each individual. And although we see patterns to how a particular dementia may progress, the presentation of that person is absolutely unique to them, and that's what should always be our consideration. But as dementia progresses, we see changes in the structure and the volume of the brain and the brain's ability to function on a daily basis, which can then result in the individual finding it difficult to perform specific activities within the course of their daily life and requiring increased support. But what should be said is like I say, the dementia itself, each individual will experience that differently, which is exactly why our care needs to be individualised and above all meaningful.
Okay, so we know what we're dealing with. At least we have a taste of what we're dealing with. I think it's absolutely fascinating, like you say, and Tom Kitwood said, that you meet one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. It must make planning units, Paul, very difficult, given that there are so many variables.
Yeah, it is a challenge. One of the challenges I think in care homes is to provide a service through a consistent team that meets every individual's needs, and those needs are multiple and varied, and are unique to each person. In answer to the question, what is dementia? I was thinking about this, and the staff teams often ask the question. So what I want is for the teams to have an understanding of what it means to the individual living with dementia, and what their role is in helping people live well. So one way I describe it to the teams is dementia being a thief, and it comes along and it steals different things from different people at different times, and it steals a little bit more of a certain thing. So one of the things I asked the group, say, what, shout out something that dementia might steal, and somebody might say confidence, somebody might say communication. So the way I would see it is each individual person has 2 facets that we need to know. One is, who are they as a person? What's their history? What are their strengths? What are they proud of? What makes them tick? And the team need to know, what is dementia doing to that individual person? What is it stealing? And if we don't know what it's stealing, we don't know what to put back in again. And some of those things that it's stealing are invisible unless you explore more deeply. So that's how I would want my teams to understand dementia on the person-centered level.
Okay, that's a fascinating analogy. I like that. That makes it very easy for me to understand, hopefully for everyone else too. Ruth, the symptoms of dementia usually become worse over time. So what are the tipping points that make specialist dementia care the best option?
I think every family has got to decide that for themselves, and work out what is the best environment for their loved one. What I would say is that what we've tried to do in our memory centres working with Furncare is to create environments that are as close to home as possible. So our memory centres are operated in a very non-clinical way. Our staff, who we call homemakers in the memory centres, don't wear uniforms. Actually, everyone has a name badge in the memory centres, and it's just their first name, because frankly, if you're someone who's already living with memory loss, it's very difficult to remember the name of the lady who sat next to you. So if we can kind of support people to make those connections, that's really helpful. And it's also about recognising that, as Paul says, people may be losing parts of themselves, but are there parts of themselves that we can support them to maintain for longer? For example, rather than just saying, you know, John can no longer use a knife and fork, so now we need to assist John with all of his meals. Can we do exercises with John to develop his manual dexterity, whether it's threading beads, whether it's strength exercises, so he can maintain some of those skills for longer? And actually what we found is with one of our family members, which is what we call our residents in the memory centre, he joined us having been in hospital for 3 months. He could no longer shave himself, do his personal care, but he was a very proud man, and that was actually really important to him. And our homemakers actually taught him to shave himself again. And they did that by using vegetables and a vegetable peeler to help him relearn the manual dexterity and the strength that he needed to then put a razor on his skin and do that safely. So I think it's also really important to recognise that people living with memory loss do sometimes have the capacity to be retrained to do some skills, particularly things that they have spent a very, very long time doing, and it is about muscle memory. So we shouldn't just assume that people are going to, I mean, of course, people will get worse over time, but what are the interventions that we can put in place? How can we do that through a more specialist environment? Do things like having a much less clinical environment, a much more family-focused environment, support them to live more independently for longer. For example, in our memory centres, we've actually put in kitchenettes, we've got kettles, we've got toasters, we've got ovens, because actually if someone can sit there and mix all of the ingredients to make a banana bread and then smell it cooking in the oven, isn't that a wonderful thing? And haven't we given that person a significantly better day? So actually, I think a lot of what we need to be focusing on in dementia care is taking away some of the clinical environments that we've created over the years and giving them a place where they feel much more comfortable, because some of the behaviours then that can be associated with the distress around dementia can be alleviated.
That's very interesting. Thanks, Ruth. And again, Paul, we were chatting the other day and you were telling me how basically your objective is to do exactly what Ruth has just prescribed. But there are little tricks and tools you can use to make that even more achievable. You were telling me, for example, about the careful selection of cutlery and crockery, for example, to make life just that little bit easier. What other types of things have you got in your dementia units that enable your residents to lead that sort of normal life and make every day better, like Ruth just described?
Well, firstly, I'd like to agree with Ruth that in the perspective of dementia as a situation that is current, is for today and it's for now, and that people can actually reduce their dementia if we accept that dementia as a range of difficulties or disabilities that people experience. And if we support people to relearn some of those skills and we make that environment around them enabling, for example, one size doesn't fit all. So one of the questions I might ask a family group is, what do you think? Blue plates, good for people with dementia? Well, it depends on the person. So for some people with dementia, their vision, their judgment of contrast, depth perception might be affected. So for some people, a plate that contrasts with all the food that they're going to eat might be useful. So we would expect the homes to have a range of different options that they can introduce for each individual. And also looking at the environment, even which part of the home, which part of the lounge, which chair, what's in their bedroom, you know, what's their home, their bedroom environment going to be like. So it needs to be with strong contrasting colours. We even might put a contrasting door frame in their bedroom to identify their toilet. When they move in, we might put a sign on the door that goes out into the hallway saying way out. But for each individual person, that will be different. But we need to have a range of options so we can find the right option in that setting for that unique individual.
I can see Lindsay nodding very enthusiastically again. So this is all good advice and all very good input. David, living with dementia, as we've heard, takes its toll and weakens the patient over time. In creating effectively a specialist or dedicated dementia unit, are there one of the, if you like, side effects of dementia, for want of a better term, is that it does weaken the resident and potentially open the door to other conditions. So is it conceivable that you might actually be wrestling with lots of different conditions all at the same time, dementia being one of potentially quite many?
Yeah, absolutely. What's a cause for huge public health celebrations? The fact that we are living longer, and that's a great thing. But as we continue to live longer, we perhaps will have other diagnosis which we do need to take into account when we are supporting a person who's living with dementia. What I'm a huge advocate for is something that Ruth has already mentioned, and that is around allowing people living with dementia to continue to take risk. And we all take risk every single day of our life, but what we find often within practice is that the minute a person is diagnosed with dementia, they're wrapped up in cotton wool. Their social integration with friends or within some environments will stop because people feel that they need to need to protect the person at all times. There are aspects of even where within some care environments, I myself am a huge advocate for things like dementia units, because I feel that people living with dementia are in all areas of a home and should be given that opportunity to live in all areas of a home. I think that's really, really important. But we do know that there are situations of whereby when a person is perhaps maybe living with another diagnosis, for example, it's really, really important that we take that into account, because that can make up quite a huge portion of their daily presentation. And it's the environment is one piece, and then the education and training of staff, in order, like what Paul's saying, in order for us to understand why the person is presenting the way that they are, it is crucial.
Yeah, I think the environment clearly has a role to play, but there's a recurring theme here, which is an acknowledgement of the training and expertise of the carers themselves. This is clearly absolutely critical to the life of the residents. Thank you, Bethan, for your lovely input there. She agrees with everything that we've been saying, gives Paul the big thumbs up. That's great to hear. We would love to hear you. I believe you've got a chat function on your screen, so please don't hesitate to use that, even if it's just to give us a thumbs up or indeed a thumbs down if you disagree with something that one of our expert panelists have said. We're going to move on now and really focus a little bit more on design for dementia. How can we create the best environments for our residents? Ruth, you've got your dedicated dementia homes, your memory centres. How do their interiors differ from the other residential homes in the Stowe portfolio, or indeed, as you've said, do you make changes in order to get that CQC rating up? What sort of things do you do?
I think what CQC would say if they were on the call now is actually none of what gets you an outstanding rating is really about the money you've spent on interiors, because you can spend an absolute fortune on interiors, but unless you are delivering meaningful lives and quality care to people on a daily basis, it's completely pointless. So I think we have thought really carefully about how we have created that environment for our memory centres, but of course all over our homes, because we have people who are living with memory loss who live in all of our homes, and that is the demographic that we deal with. What we're offering in a memory centre is it's a different experience with a greater number of homemakers looking after you than might be standard, and people want to pay a different amount for different types of care. So I don't think it doesn't change hugely the way that we operate our environments. But as I said, I think what's been really important is to create Much more, you know, when I walk into any of our lounges, I want it to feel as though I'm walking into a comfortable, cozy living room. And actually, sometimes that can be a real challenge. I mean, a number of our properties are grade 2 listed mansions dating back 200 years with huge rooms, very different to what a modern care home construction would look like. And I've always felt it's really important within those larger spaces to create cozy areas, because let's face it, most people coming from their own home do not have huge grand rooms. So actually, what can we do to make that space cozier, more comfortable, and I would say less anxiety creating, particularly for someone who's living with memory loss. And the same actually applies to outdoor spaces as well. A lot of our homes have got huge, extensive grounds that are not necessarily well suited for people who are living with memory loss. So what's been a real focus for us over the last few years is creating beautiful courtyard areas that again have got things that would stimulate people, particularly living with memory loss, and whether that's having an element of running water, whether that's having different types of wall art, trees that they can see from their windows, that, you know, maybe different lighting. It's looking at all of these elements. So the outside to us is as important as the inside is. But I think it's been interesting actually looking at where we were with our first memory centre to what we then developed 2 or 3 years down the line, and actually learning the lessons from our first memory centre. And by and large, we had got it right. But some of the things are what we are adding to that environment in terms of things to support daily living, things that are genuinely useful. What are we adding in terms of cookery equipment? What are we adding in terms of snack stations? What are all of those added extras that are going to give people the best day?
That's great. What you mentioned there, Ruth, about the outdoors certainly rings a bell with me. I was at one of the Athena care homes in Kings Lynn just last week, and had a fantastic visit there where they showed me some of the incredible things they were doing to make sure that outdoor space really stimulated all the senses and gave all those experiences that you just described there. So that's really great. Lindsay, we're talking about design for dementia now. So as you would expect, it's time for the interior designers to step up and contribute. So someone with dementia inevitably experiences what we might call visuospatial, try and say it, difficulties, problems processing information about their environment and 3D objects, that kind of thing. So what kind of things can be done to make interiors more dementia friendly, but I think, as Paul and Ruth have both emphasised, without kind of institutionalising them?
Yeah, well, I suppose one of the main things to consider is contrast. So contrast we can determine by LRVs, which is light reflectance values. So they run on a scale from 0 to 100, 0 being black, so reflecting no light at all from the surface, and 100 being almost white, so reflecting the maximum amount of light. So every surface that interior designer or architect would specify will have a light reflectance value. So for someone with a visual impairment, they need to see one kind of critical element against another. So you need 30 points difference to be able to see sufficient contrast between those two elements. So critical elements in the environment are things like the floor against the walls, your furniture against the floor, your toilet seat against the floor and also against the pan, your door against the wall, that sort of thing. And that all helps somebody with a visual impairment navigate the space easier, be able to see, enable them to bump into objects. But then conversely, the other area where we're not looking for contrast is within flooring. So if it's a level floor, we don't want any contrast between abutting or adjacent floor finishes. So if you're going from maybe a corridor into a bedroom, for example, you want those LRVs values for maybe it's a carpet onto a vinyl floor. They should be within 10 LRV of each other, ideally less than 8 apart, and that includes threshold strips as well. So ideally want that to kind of match or avoid a threshold strip altogether. Definitely avoid anything, a threshold strip that's really shiny, because that can attract attention, cause glare. And the only area that we want to see a contrast within flooring is steps. So where you're highlighting a nosing on steps, because you're actually highlighting that there is a level change there. And we know from research that where people see a contrast in flooring, they perceive it as a step, even if it isn't a level change. So it's really important.
I've heard sort of very dark mats on a light coloured flooring. People think they're holes in the floor and actually try and walk around them and navigate around them.
Yeah, it's just that can be a really tricky area when you enter a building. You've got a black kind of entrance barrier mat, and that often they're dark because it's much more practical. And if you go from maybe a light kind of buff pavior externally to this mat, then to an internal kind of maybe like a light wood within a reception area, and that barrier entrance mat can then be a barrier. And somebody might not want to cross that barrier. They might not want to step on it because, as you say, they misinterpret it and perceive it as a hole or something to avoid. I think Paul put his hand up.
Yes, Lindsay. Just reflecting on what you're saying about the mats, I often find that if somebody has a pressure mat by their bed to alert the team that somebody's getting out of bed in case they're at risk of falling, often what they'll try to do is climb around it, climb over it. They try to avoid it because they're seeing it as something doesn't make sense. It might be a big hole. So it actually, in some cases, can increase people's risk of falling.
We do know it does. A lot of the falls that are recorded tend to be in kind of corridor areas and circulation areas, and that's when you get the most kind of floor junctions between different doorways, and that's where you get maybe the threshold strip and you get changes within flooring. So we know that people high step, and that leads to either freeze of gait or it leads to kind of tripping and falling.
That's very interesting. Now, Jade, I didn't tell everybody, but I'm actually sitting in the Furncare showroom, which has got something like a dozen or 18 different room sets, which incidentally, you're all most welcome to come and visit. Just give us a call. I'm actually sitting in, would you believe, the Remini collection room, which is, as I've already explained, the collection which Lindsay and her team at the University of Stirling have just given us this glowing accreditation. But Jade, tell us what is so special about this furniture? What makes it particularly dementia friendly? We've heard about colour and contrast, and we can talk more about that in a moment. But it's some of the more physical attributes of the furniture which fascinate me.
Yes, so I mean, with the Admiral range, as you can sort of see sitting behind Mike there, you can see there's the shadow gap openings, which are proven to aid dementia residents in sort of being able to see what's in the drawers. It's not always about, that so much. It's about them seeing what's in there, because they don't know always what's in that drawer, and helping them sort of know that is key. And obviously paired together with all the other pieces in the range, the furniture works really well for that. We've had some really good feedback on that so far as well, I believe.
Yeah, these cut-out gaps, these cut-out sections obviously mean that there's a direct sight line for residents to see what's inside, just to refresh their memory if they've forgotten what goes where. But it's also interesting that there's no infill panel. There's no glass or acrylic infill panel. So you have literally direct access. Is there a reason for that? Do you know? Or maybe, Lindsay, you could help us there. Because I've heard that by filling in that gap, it's a real contradiction for some people. There's nothing there, and yet there's something there.
Well, I suppose that we found when we were doing the assessment that it actually gave two options. There was an option that some people with maybe limited dexterity might find it harder to actually pull the handle to open those drawers, but it actually gives you another option that you can grab the edge of that opening, and you can use that as a pull as well. And it also avoids the issue of having glass or acrylic, which might have reflection or glare as well. So you're avoiding that kind of reflection, which can be confusing as well.
Okay, so Jade, we've got contrast on the units, as you can see, between the verticals and the horizontals. They're different finishes. So I'm presuming that's been designed in to help the residents differentiate between verticals and horizontals and understand better the three-dimensional sort of aspect of each piece.
Yes, I mean, that coupled with the contrasting colours, so you've got the wood finish against the painted finish, which has been fully considered as well, and obviously achieves a greater value than 30% LRV contrast. And the handles, again, they play a part too. So every aspect of the range has been fully considered, and obviously that's why we've managed to achieve the accreditation that we have. So we believe that this range will be excellent in those environments.
Okay, Ruth, I think you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, just for people out there thinking about changes that they might want to make and, interested in the kind of impact of what we've been discussing, what I would say, and, I'm doing this with my hat of how to take your home from requires improvement to good or good to outstanding. And if you are interested in more information about this, have a look at theoutstandingsociety.co.uk. It's a free to join organisation. You do not have to be outstanding to join it. It's about trying to help people to level up across social care. But so much of it is about evidencing what you have done and the impact that it has had. So, if you take a change that you're thinking of making around your environment, you need to be able to articulate, and I would really advise have it written down as a case study, what you have done, those changes you've made, why you made those changes, and what difference has it made to the lives of your residents. Because if you cannot demonstrate the change it has made to their lives, the whole thing is pointless, to be honest. So you must take this as a full story, create a case study, and help your team understand why you have made the changes. Get families involved as well. If you have taken someone into one of your care homes who has been falling a lot at home, and actually you've created an environment for them which is much safer for them, what have you done and what difference has it made? Get some family feedback in that as well, because this is how you make the difference. It's not simply by putting a new set of furniture in, it's by proving the difference it has made. So, hopefully that kind of steer will get you in the right direction.
Good.
Also, don't when you do have CQC visit or local authorities, don't, like Ruth says, don't wait for them to ask to look for something. You have to have that evidence there ready to show them, because they won't ask for everything. If you don't tell them, they won't know. So have it ready.
I really like, Ruth, the way you describe the Outstanding Society about sharing this information so we can all support each other and learn each other. I think we've, as Lindsay has already suggested, we've done a lot of work on this new Remini range. And I think what we'll be doing in the very near future is publishing what's effectively a white paper or some documentation that everybody can download and share, so that we do share that knowledge quite literally. So I think that's a great thing to do. Jade, all of our furniture, correct me if I'm wrong, has safety features built into it, like rounded corners and things like that, not just exclusive to Remini. Are there any other physical attributes of the environment that you'd just like to highlight?
So if we're looking at are we talking about bedrooms or just in general?
Well, actually, that's a really good point you make, because inevitably here I am sitting in a bedroom. I know Paul is as well. You can see the bed in the background there. We are talking about bedrooms a lot of the time, but we've also alluded several times to more communal areas. And as Lindsay has said, there's a lot of the communal areas, for example, corridors, are effectively high-risk areas. So we should be very conscious of the design features everywhere, not just in the bedrooms, communal areas too.
Yeah, definitely. I would, absolutely agree. As well as creating that home from home sort of approach and supporting independence in those ways, we also need to be very mindful of how we go about that. And, we work very closely with home managers when we design spaces for dementia residents, and we want to be ticking the box and creating environments that are specific to the needs within that home. There is no one approach fits all when it comes to dementia. We know that, and certainly in terms of dementia environments, there's key fundamentals, as Lindsay has mentioned, and Ruth, such as the LRV values. But we want to go one step further. We want to create those home from home spaces. And, as Ruth said, we want that physical evidence that environment has actually made a considerable difference to these people's lives. And, we want to encourage their personalities to flourish, reduce wandering behaviours and help with wayfinding and that sort of thing through design.
You talk about physical evidence, Jade. In fact, everybody's mentioned it, quite rightly so. How can the care homes find out, for example, what the LRV values of different products are, so that they can coordinate the rooms appropriately?
So any finish should have an LRV value. So if you're looking at flooring for care homes, there are specific flooring suppliers and specific types of floorings that you can look at that are better for sort of dementia environments. But every surface will have an LRV value. So when you're looking at products like paint, for instance, every paint will have an LRV, and every fabric should have an LRV as well. There are some fabrics and faux leathers that don't have an LRV value if they're particularly sort of textured, or if they have multiple different colours within the thread. They can't always pinpoint a definite LRV for that, because obviously there's quite a lot of variation there in terms of tone. But sort of as you're looking, really, I think you just need to make an effort to sort of look for them.
And you've made a point of ensuring that the LRV values are actually published in our Remedy brochure. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So every item will show the LRV. Yeah.
That's great. Well, listen, everybody, I've just glanced at the clock. We're very nearly out of time. I think we could have carried on all morning, and maybe we should on another occasion. But we're going to have to wrap this up now. Just before we go, panelists, any precious nuggets of advice that you want to leave everybody with?
Well, I have one that might be helpful.
Cool, go for it.
Thank you. One of my biggest tips for the team and for families would be to see the world through the eyes of the person that you're supporting, rather than, because the care team can be very busy doing jobs here and there, running around, but they must stop and literally look at the world from the point of view of somebody who's living in that home, sitting next beside them, listening to what they're hearing, looking at what they're seeing. Can I make sense of the environment? So put yourself in their world, I think, is my number one tip.
I think that's great advice, Paul. I think it's been a great session. I hope you all agree. I wanted to put together an expert panel, and by Jiminy, that's exactly what we've got here. Thank you to our panelists. I think you've all been absolutely fantastic and made an invaluable contribution. I hope everybody that's watching has got something out of it. I'd also like to thank Robin and Molly from Furncare for putting this webinar together. Fantastic job, guys. Thank you very much for your support. I hope you can all join us for the next Subject Matters webinar, which will be called Outside Matters, which looks into the role of gardens at residential homes. Look out for Randall Southall's excellent article on the subject in the next edition of the Care Home Environment magazine, where we see what Furncare customer Athena Homes have done to the grounds of Goodwin's Hall Care Home in Kings Lynn. And I think, Flavia, I think you're watching Hello, lovely visit there last week. If you'd like to know more about Remini, the Furncare Dementia Collection, or any of the other specialist care home furniture that we produce, obviously we'd be delighted to hear from you. Until then, I'd like to thank our panel once again, and thank you for joining us today. I hope to see you again on another Furncare Subject Matters webinar very soon. Enjoy the rest of the week and have a great bank holiday weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.